Call to order the President, Board of Trustees, roll call.
Trustee Rasich,
Here.
Trustee Wojciechowski,
Here.
Trustee Benucci,
Here.
Trustee Lamb,
Here.
Trustee O'Rourke,
Here.
Trustee Peck, Mayor Collins.
Here. I'll rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're seeking a motion for the approval of the minutes of the Committee of the Whole workshop held on October 12th, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Trustee Rasich,
Yes.
Trustee Wojciechowski,
Yes.
Trustee Benucci,
Yes.
Trustee Lamb,
Yes.
Trustee O'Rourke.
Yes.
Minutes are approved. Presidential comments?
I just have one, and condolences go out to the family of Jim Waldorf, who passed away the other day and was interned today. Like I said, to his and his family, deepest condolences.
Trustees' comments?
I want to make a comment about the haunted house at the police station that went on here the last couple weekends. It benefits the Foundation for Excellence, and that supports education and learning in the school district, scholarships for teachers, for students, and a variety of other items that the foundation is able to pay for. And in particular, the police department every year with their DARE program, and the officers were there, and they're just so wonderful. And another group besides PEMA that also is out helping there are the Police Explorers, and that's a young program of young adults that want to come out and learn more about what it's like to be part of the police department. So that's something to look into if you have an interest in your high school age student, and you have an interest in the police department or law enforcement future. So thank you very much, everybody.
Are there other trustee comments? Any other trustee comments? Seeing none, now is the time for public comments. Seeing that there's no public in the audience, I'm guessing there's no public comments. So we'll move on to the workshop. First and only agenda tonight is the 2016-17 draft fiscal year budget. Mrs. Pleckham and Mr. Persons will walk us through the street division and miscellaneous funds budgets. And with this, I will turn it over to Mr. Persons.
Yes, thank you very much. This is continuing our series discussion about the budget. We've talked about capital so far and some of the other funds earlier too as well. And tonight we're going to talk about streets, and in the future we have the other remaining funds to discuss. The board is required to pass the budget before May 1st, and in the past 25, 30 years, in my memory, we've never failed to not take care of that. So we're well ahead, and we are anticipating just an informal discussion tonight, specifically about the street division. I want to thank Patrick Miller. He's behind me here, street superintendent. He'll be here to answer any of the tough questions that you may have. But first, we'll work through the different budget items within streets. The mission of the department, and I'll go ahead and read it, is to provide the highest level of service that is responsive to the needs of the residents and businesses. We will strive to protect the interests of the village by properly operating and maintaining our public infrastructure. We will provide efficient service for our residents while maintaining a safe work environment for our employees. We will encourage to develop new skills within our department in an effort to improve the overall service level to our community. And you'll see that throughout the department. This is the mission of Public Works. During the past several years, and this is kind of a graphic depiction of where we were at population-wise in comparison to where we are in staff ratio. And you've seen similar graphs from the police department, and we'll see more in the future, I'm sure. But it shows how much the village has really grown over the past 15 years or so, and that how we've changed as far as the staff ratio is concerned. And I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way. The Public Works Division is not asking for any new employees this year, but I like to bring this graph to light because it does bring attention to the efficiencies that have been developed over the years within Public Works and within the other departments too as well. So in 1996, we actually had 2.5 employees per 1,000 residents within the community. We currently have 0.8 employees per 1,000 residents within the community. But in my opinion, we actually provide a higher level of service in many ways, in many different levels within the department. So let me go to the next one. Give you an idea, in the street division in 86, we had 8 people, 9 in water and sewer, 1 in engineering administration. That was me, so if you're looking for that one person, that was me. We had a total of 18 people. In 2009, we had 42 full-time employees within the village too as well. And the economy kind of took a little downturn, and the village wasn't immune to that. And part of it, the reason why we did make some changes, is because there weren't as many water meters to install, and there weren't as many locates to take care of, and development-related issues to address too as well. And on top of that, we found other efficiencies through technology to make the job less labor-intensive and to reduce the total staff that we actually needed to operate the department. So to improve on efficiencies, we're at the same level that we were last year. We have a total of 32 employees, and pleased that we've had some growth in the engineering division, which ultimately saves us money too as well. On the organizational chart, this is the same as last year. Through the different divisions within Public Works, we have a water superintendent, a wastewater superintendent, a street superintendent, and a superintendent over the engineering division, and they all have their respective employees that take care of the services and needs for our community too as well. So that's a quick overview. As far as our employees are concerned, the depth of knowledge within the organization is quite extensive, and I'm pleased that the department has grown in that direction, that if any one of us, from the street superintendent to the director, is unable, ill, or has an illness in the family or whatnot, the department continues to move forward. We have that leadership within our employees within our organization. 9 of our employees are graduates of the Illinois Public Service Leadership Institute. 3 are certified arborists. 4 are Class A water system managers. 3 are Class 1 certified wastewater system managers. That means in these individuals, actually 4 individuals total, they are certified to be responsible for any size water or wastewater facility within the state of Illinois. So from the state of Chicago, wow, that was a slip. From the city of Chicago, and maybe it's wishful thinking in the future for Chicago, from the city of Chicago all the way down to Peatone and other communities, we have people that are certified to operate those facilities, but they choose to stay here because they enjoy working with the other employees, serving the community, and they find the work to be challenging and rewarding too as well. We have 3 ASE certified mechanics, 1 automotive mechanic instructor, actually at Joliet Junior College. He's a college graduate, and he's also teaches at JJC part-time. We have 2 certified individuals in electrical maintenance for streetlights, 2 instructors that are certified by IDOT for work zone safety and flagger training, and we actually train other departments too as well. 1 professional engineer that's certified in bridge inspection, and that's Mr. Threewood. All the street division employees, they're endorsed to operate heavy equipment. It means they have CDL driver's license, plus they have additional training to operate heavy equipment out in the field and do it properly and do it safely. And we all participate in continuing education. That includes regular safety meetings. We have a safety meeting with all the employees every other week, and then we have regular formal safety training on a regular basis, typically every other month too as well. To add to the efficiencies and to help us with the efficiencies, several years ago we did construct, or the village did construct, a public works facility that brought all the departments together under one roof. It really did allow us to share equipment more efficiently, to schedule things more efficiently, and communications greatly increased as far as helping other departments. So We're in the same building. We're glad to have the building department there too as well. There's definitely a nexus in that as we review plans, have meetings with developers and engineers and talk about projects. It's a great place to connect together, and it's really been a benefit and help save money for the community too as well. In our vehicle maintenance area and fueling station, there are 2 items where we actually care for and maintain over 200 pieces of equipment. This includes all of the police vehicles, all of the public works vehicles, planning, building, the mowers, the loaders, all the pieces of equipment get maintained by our out of our maintenance shop, and our mechanics do an outstanding job. The benefit to the fueling station is the detriment is occasionally it does need some maintenance, but overall on fuel we save anywhere between 50 cents to $1 a gallon on gasoline. So at Shell today it's $2.55 in that range. We'll typically buy it at $1.50 to $1.75 a gallon. So there's a big savings in fuel, and we've realized that through the budget and saved money too as well. Street light maintenance, we have 2 employees that are certified. In the past, we had contracted this out, and one of the disadvantages is that to really make it cost effective, we'd have to wait until we had 4 or 5 or 6 lights that were out to call a contractor out. Now we have taken care of that in-house for over 3 years. We complete over 700 street light repairs in a given year, and we've also installed 500 new LED street lights. You'll see a slight increase in the budget related to electricity and also in purchasing material for street lighting too as well. We are still applying for grants related to LED lighting, and the goal is to ultimately get the 6,000 lights that we have there converted over to LED lighting. It will create a savings. We'll save about anywhere from 50 to 60% in electrical costs by converting to LEDs. So it's more of a long-term vision, and we're hoping that there's some grant monies for LED lighting in the future. Street sign installation.
Before you leave off of that,
Sure.
with regard to LED lighting, there have been a number of advances made in that technology, but I know that you've done some stuff to make sure that what we have been putting in is somewhat future-proofed, so that as these improvements happen, we aren't wasting our investment. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, exactly. We have standardized the street lighting for LED lighting. Although much like computers, if it's a GE standard, they will come up with a new version about every 6 months. So we do buy some additional parts as far as replacement and repair is concerned, and then we do have LED street lights that are on the shelves that we will change out. So you'll find in a few instances that you've got 10 conventional old street lights and then a couple of LED lights along the way, because it doesn't make sense to put the old technology in. So all we buy right now are the LED lights. Now, to Brian's point too as well, they last 4 to 5 times longer than the old street lights. They seem to be pretty resistant as far as weather is concerned, and anticipated life is about 10 years on these street lights as opposed to 2 or 3 years on a conventional light. And we've been very happy with the performance. The ones that we did install 3-4 years ago are still in operation, still working very well. So, sure. Yeah, we started with the oldest lights first. So we tried to eliminate any of the lights that had mercury in the lights, because mercury bulbs are no longer being manufactured, at least not in this country, and they're not easy to find. So those were the first lights that we focused on as far as replacing. And then we looked at other areas where it just made sense. The subdivision was 10 to 15 years old, and we were getting more work orders for that particular area, that we would focus on that subdivision. So, for instance, Arbor Creek was the subdivision that we just completed a couple of months ago, and we decided that we did have some grant money and we had the street lighting to take the entire subdivision and make the improvement there. And so we did put that investment into the subdivision, knowing that we most likely won't have any problems there for the next 10 years. Part of the other reason is It's one of the subdivisions that is furthest away from Public Works. And to get called back every week for work orders didn't really make sense. It was really time consuming. The other part of it, with the work going on Route 30, it's more difficult to get to that subdivision than it is others. So we took that all into consideration, and it was one of the subdivisions that was after we replaced the old sodium vapor mercury lights that we went on and we tackled that subdivision. We hope to do many more in the future.
Ellen, for the benefit of the public, can you tell us about how many of the 6,000 lights have been converted? And then when they're all converted, the dollar cost savings per year from original lighting to the new LED?
Yes, the new structure for, thankfully, because when LEDs first came out and we were under ComEd, they didn't have a system to recognize the cost savings for LED lighting. So currently we have about 500 street lights total that have been converted to LEDs. They get moved to another list on billing, and that we pay a reduced rate for those street lights. So, you know, it is a cost savings. It's at 500 versus 6,000 lights. I know it's not huge at this point, but maintenance-wise, it's a big savings, and it's a step in the right direction. Good. All right. Street sign production, we've taken that in-house, significant savings in just generating street signs. We can generate specialty signs too as well. We do that in-house on our side. We can also, as needed, based on the agreement that we have with Plainfield Township and Wheatland Township too as well, we can assist them at times because they do not have this type of technology, and we're happy to work with them on projects in the future. Landscaping and
Just-
maintenance.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Speaking of streetlight, where are we at on our arm for up here near the Lockport Street? And has there been, I know Scott, I received a letter from Scott Treewith saying that he wrote, or at least a copy sent to DOT, referenced the truck route signs on Route 30. Has anything moved on that, or are we still just waiting?
Both. I hate to use the term that we're waiting because we're always actively involved with discussions with IDOT. Both of those permit requests are in the Schaumburg office at IDOT, and we will follow up on both of the requests.
I know we've tried, but I know they're dragging their feet, but I just wondered where we're at. So.
The engineering design is completed. It's ready for bid. We just need a permit from IDOT to move forward. Good question. Landscaping maintenance to reduce cost. We actually had 14 part-time, generally college age young people to help take care of maintenance throughout the community, the parks that we have, the park right-of-ways, the downtown, and this has been very beneficial to helping reduce costs. And it's one of those times when we really need the extra labor. It gives young people an opportunity to contribute to the community. It's a good summer job too as well, and they do a very nice job for us, so we appreciate that. While we're on this slide, I'll talk about Route 59 a little bit too as well. We did, as a test this past year, contract out the work on Route 59 as far as not only the mowing but also the fertilizing, the care for the trees and the shrubs and the trimming and the weeding and all those things that are needed along Route 59. And one of the big challenges for the contractor was just to spruce up and maintain the viaduct in that area. And just from my own personal observation and the comments that we've received, it's, in my opinion, it's the best that it's looked since it was originally installed. And the contractor, in our opinion, has done a very, very good job this year. Keep in mind, that is a 7-mile stretch that's within the village of Plainfield. So it is quite a stretch that's in the village of Plainfield. And the contractor that we bid out did a very nice job, and we would recommend to the board, and we've included in the budget, contractual services for Route 59 for the coming year or two as well.
I, for one, totally concur. They've done a wonderful job. It looks great coming into town, so kudos to them.
You know, Ellen and the board, not only is the Route 59 district looking very good, but outside the building here, this small entryway into Village Drive, into First Midwest Bank, into Wallen Woods, etc. Your crew cleaned it up this past week. That was really an eyesore for the longest period of time. They did really a professional job of trimming the trees, putting the landscape in order. It is really an attractive look, and it really is a compliment to our village.
And the employees take great pride in the property, and it really shows too as well.
Absolutely.
I do appreciate that, and we appreciate our summer employees because it does help out quite a bit. Street maintenance, street sweeping on a regular basis. I think this summer that we've completed more street sweeping than we ever have in the past, and I mean that in the kindest and most affectionate way. Not only did we take care of the streets within our community, but we were also requested by Plainfield Township and Wheatland Township to sweep their streets as well, which we did. We were able to work that within the schedule, and they did appreciate it, and it looks pretty nice too as well. They have fewer lane miles of roadway than we do, but it was a service that they couldn't provide internally. Of course, we're tracking the hours and the work related to that too as well, and they really do appreciate it, and communications has been great too as well with the townships. Technology, that's one of the biggest items that's helped us reduce labor costs and just save money for the village overall. As the board is aware, it's kind of a milestone this year, and I'm thankful that the board adopted the new ADA standards for the community. And part of adopting the new ADA standards and policy is that any street that we come in and resurface or reconstruct, that we bring the pathways and the sidewalks up to the new ADA standards. And that work's been completed for all the roadways that we had worked on this year, the many miles of roadways that we had worked on this year. But part of it is technology too as well. We did have 4 summer engineering interns that had taken the iPads that was provided by our IT department and by our GIS department, and that they can literally go out there, walk the sidewalks, find a deviation in the sidewalk, and I know this was a question about finding trip hazards and things like that. Measure the deviation in the sidewalk, take a picture of it, and then based on the GPS locations, it automatically uploads to a map that's right here on the server in the building. So at the end of the day, they can print off where they've been, where there are problem areas that need attention, and that also log the condition of each one of the intersections. Are they in compliance with today's ADA standards, and then how does that fall in with the rest? We were able to cover about 1/3 of the community, and the reason why this one kind of lands in the capital program and then in streets too as well is that as soon as a report is made for a sidewalk that needs attention, then that information will generate a work order. It'll be forwarded to Mr. Miller and his team, and they will go out there and take care of, they'll do a temporary repair for any trip hazards that are out there. That may be a concrete temporary repair for that, or it may be saw cutting of the sidewalk, or if it is an issue where the sidewalk is settling at a rapid rate, it's removal of the sidewalk and replacement of the sidewalk. And this all happens just based on, and there's a picture of Mr. Threewitt, but it could be one of our college interns, making one visit to one location and uploading the information, gets transferred to the street department. It basically turns 4 trips into 2 trips to get it taken care of and resolved. So that's been very, very helpful for us. We knew that snow removal would be one of the questions for the evening, so we did prepare a few things, and I have some questions for the board just as far as open discussion is concerned. First of all, what I wanted to start with is everyone is aware we did have a blizzard here this past February, and after the blizzard, we did take a look at the operations and what had occurred during the storm, after the storm, how it was approached. And we took quite a bit of time in really analyzing what was done and what could be done better too as well. On February the 9th at the Committee of the Whole meeting, we did provide a blizzard after action statement, and we did read it, and I won't read it word for word at the meeting. We posted this on the website. It generated a few newspaper articles too as well, so it's kind of old news in a way. But the reason why it's important to bring this up is that every item that was brought out within this after action statement has been translated into the new budget as far as suggestions, and it's ultimately at the approval of the board, to help improve our response to that type of event. If we do get that type of event, now that typically only occurs once every 3 or 4 or 5 years, but we should be ready for it at any time. So let me go through a couple of things, and then we're going to pause, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions too as well to the board. First of all, thankfully, you know, the salt prices were a lot better this year for us, which helped save money in the budget too. And the village board did authorize earlier, just a couple of months ago, the purchase of 4,000 tons of salt. Now we already have 1,000 tons of salt, and that we have the ability to actually purchase another 800 tons of salt above the 400 or 4,000 under the contract at the same price. So ultimately, we could have almost 6,000 tons of salt ready for use. Now our goal is to get the entire 4,000 tons of salt delivered before Thanksgiving. And based on the rate, and thank goodness for Columbus Day, based on the rate of deliveries, when we initiate an order, which is approximately 1,000 tons, they come in at a rate of about 200 tons per day. And on Columbus Day, we had received about 800 tons of salt a day. It was a 5-day, 6-day operation compressed into one. So thankfully, you know, we were open and we were able to receive it. We've gotten about 30% of our order in total. We just initiated the second 1,000 tons of salt. That order, 200 tons came in today. So we're at about 30%. We have the storage capability to store 5,000 tons or even 6,000 or 7,000 tons of salt if need be. The highest amount of salt that we've used in any given year has been just under 5,000 tons. So keep that in mind in the most brutal winter that we've had in the past. And last year was not the most brutal winter that we had overall in the past. We had a tough event, but up until that event, it was a pretty mild winter. But in the most brutal year, we used 6,000 tons. We'll have at our discretion approximately 6,000 to 7,000 tons of salt, but we will definitely have over 6,000 tons of salt in storage, and the goal is before Thanksgiving. So I want to thank the board for approving that too as well. That was one of the after-action items that talked about pre-wetting and pre-salting too as well. If the roadways had a little additional salt or calcium chloride before the event occurred, it may have improved the response to the storm too as well. So we have additional salt to address that if needed in the future. The village board also did approve the intergovernmental agreements with Plainfield Township and with Wheatland Township. And I mentioned the street sweeping and some of the sign work, even work with a bucket truck to repair street lights that they may have, or street lights, parking lot lights that they have in their parking lots and things of that nature. Some of the technical assistance too as well. Wheatland Township resurfaced 127th Street, and we were partners in that for our portion of it, and we're paying our proportionate share. And that Plainfield Township was a partner in the River Road resurfacing that was completed last week. And we completed that project, but they're paying their proportionate share. So this new relationship with the townships, I believe, is a great benefit to everyone within the community, not only within the village, but within the township too as well. And we would like to continue to promote that. Now, we did get a call from the highway commissioner from Naosay Township, Mr. Hassert, and he also would like to be considered to be a party to an intergovernmental agreement. So I would like to bring that back to the next board meeting for approval, because we do have some roadways that we annex to the far southwest of the community, that their crews, instead of lifting the snow blades and not plowing the village's section and having us go out there and do it, they would be more than willing to take care of that section for us. And that's a better savings for us because we can focus on the community too as well. So I'd like to bring that back to the next, at the next board meeting too as well. We've updated our contracts, and that was one of the items in the past. Last year, we only had 3 contractors that had been approved by the board that were working for the village. We need our contractors. I'm not going to beat up on our contractors tonight because we do need our contractors. It doesn't make sense to hire 10 additional employees and buy 10 additional trucks for an event that happens once every 3 or 4 years, or even these more regular events that we get, it just doesn't make financial sense to staff up when you really don't have the work for the employees to do during the rest of the year. So we do need our contractors, but we need good, responsible, responsive contractors. So we did have 3 individuals that were approved last year. We've received 6 qualified contractors, full submittals from 6 qualified contractors within the area. Actually, 5 are under the standard contract, and what we did was we took the contract language, in essence, that was very similar to Naperville's contract. Mr. Harvey and I had reviewed the contract to make sure that it was consistent with what's allowed, and we also added some additional things based on feedback from the mayor and the board. We established the prices for each one of the pieces of equipment, and in the statement, the contractors that sign on agree that they'll charge that standard amount, so everyone gets paid the same amount for the pieces of equipment. And we have 5 highly qualified contractors that have provided submittals. Those will be before the board at the next board meeting, so a week from tonight. We have 1 highly qualified contractor who has submitted prices that are slightly higher than the standard prices. And what we would recommend is that this contractor be approved, first of all, based on their experience, location, and the benefits of the large equipment that they have. But second of all, based on the fact that they would be an alternative emergency contractor that we would use not as our normal routine contractor, but if we did run into a blizzard, staff could call on this contractor, and they would be under the contractor, perform in a certain manner, and charge the rates that are quoted too as well. So we'd like to bring that forward, and I can give more detail about it at the next meeting next Monday night. So we're really pleased that we have 6 qualified contractors. That doubles the number. There was a comment and question about cul-de-sacs. We have 388 cul-de-sacs out there. If the board does approve the 6 contractors next week, it will add, we currently, to give you an idea, we currently have 2 large end loaders and 2 small end loaders to clean cul-de-sacs. So we have 4 pieces of equipment that we could dedicate to, if we had the people to dedicate to clean cul-de-sacs. This will bring the total number up to 20. You'll actually have 20 contracted end loaders to clean cul-de-sacs as needed. So instead of 10 or 12 hours to clean cul-de-sacs, that time frame with that number of pieces of equipment could be cut down significantly into the range anywhere between 2 and 4 hours could be done. And so that would be at the board's direction, and it depends on the severity of the event, but it really does open up the opportunity to get that additional assistance, and we've got good response from these contractors too as well. And that's coming up next. The other item that I have is the snow handbook that was provided to all the trustees too as well, and let me explain a little bit about this more for the public than anything else. This is the updated snow book. I can tell you that this is a draft version. This is not the complete version, because inside the snow handbook, there are some important parts of it, which you have within here, is after the cover page, is the standard operating procedures for the department. This snow handbook, once it's finalized, gets provided to every one of the employees within Public Works, even the employees that we use in the Water and Sewer Division that we may not use on every single event, but they need to know what the standard operating procedures are. And then it's also provided to all of our contractors too as well, and it gives focus as to what's important and how we treat the streets and what methodology do we use to work through this. So within the document, I can tell you a few things that have been changed this year. And in the second sentence where it says, if a major storm or snow or ice event is imminent, crews will pre-salt and or pre-treat main roadways, major intersections, bridges, and other significant roadways. We've done this as a practice before in the past, and it really depends on the storm, but we really haven't codified it in the handbook. It's just been general knowledge that, okay, Bob, you go get the bridges and Jim, you take care of this, and things like that. So I think it's important to bring it into the document so the public understands this is a regular thing that we do, and that it's important to do that too as well. Most of the other information talks about this is a salting operation. Keep in mind in-house, and I think this is important to maintain the equipment and the staff level to be able to salt the entire community within a reasonable amount of time. And for most communities, a reasonable amount of time is about 4 hours. In about 4 to 5 hours, we can salt the entire community with the crews that we have. And so I think that's a great testament to our employees here too as well. Of course, the contractors, when they're called out, will have the ability and have pledged equipment to not only plow but also to salt, because many plowing operations turn into plowing and salting operations too as well. This talks a little bit about the beet juice that's used as well. I know that was a question that came up as to what type of chemicals that we're using. The salt brine or calcium chloride beet juice mix has been highly effective. It gets sprayed on the salt and it actually helps activate the salt. It prevents clumping and it does a lot of good things as far as accelerating the melting rate, especially when it's cold outside. And that'll be utilized based on the event. We have a 5,000-gallon tank in the back of the Public Works facility by the salt bin where the employees do utilize that on a regular basis. So, and that tank is large enough to get us through many events. So it's nice to have that extra storage. Under the plowing operation, that's a salting operation under plowing. After we receive more than 2 inches of accumulation, and then the plows go down and the employees will start plowing the routes. This is typically the time that the contractors get called in to assist. They're put on notification within the contract. They're put on call, and then they're brought into operation, and then the contractors will take care of their routes, and that the forces kind of join together. Now, we do have regular meetings, snow command meetings over at Public Works to talk about responsibilities and just get feedback too as well. Another item that's been added in here is that you'll find halfway down the document it talks about alleyways, cul-de-sacs, and dead-end streets are typically cleared during the end of an event. This is a new sentence that's been added. However, during severe events, additional trucks, loaders will be assigned to clear cul-de-sacs to clear cul-de-sacs as needed. So there is some additional language to say that in certain events where we can't get into the cul-de-sacs within a reasonable amount of time, that we are going to assign additional equipment to take care of that too as well. And the last sentence, above all, the safety of our residents, pedestrians, motorists traveling our roadways, and the general public is our top priority within snow removal and with all of our operations. The second page is actually what's posted on the website right now, and there's a little bit of updating that needs to take place with this part of the document. Then you get into the next section, and it displays how the community is broken up into 8 different routes. They're approximately 50 lane miles each. And then after each sheet, you'll find that there's a highlighted area or blown up area for that section. So if contractor A is assigned to route number 1, and let's say for whatever reason, contractor A was on route 2 last time and we had to switch it around a little bit or we had to reassign them, they'll have a booklet to know exactly what streets are in route A and where they need to be. So this is helpful, and I know it's a little bit more on the low-tech side, but it is very helpful, and we get a lot of good feedback from our contractors and employees to know, where they should be as far as subdivisions are concerned. There are several sheets, I think about 30 sheets, that go into detail as far as each location and streets as far as their names on the maps. And then in the very back, you'll find this is more of an aid to our drivers, that if they get a call from a specific subdivision or location of court, they can look up the subdivision name based on the street, or they'll look up the street name and it'll give them the subdivision name, and it'll give you other information that's pertinent to finding that location too as well. So it's a little bit on the low-tech side, but this has been very helpful, especially for our contractors to know that, hey, if we have a problem on this particular court and I need it taken care of right away, they can look up, find out what subdivisions it's in, and then take care of it too as well. One of the things that the book doesn't have is that it doesn't have the route assignments, the names, the phone numbers, and the contractor's responsibilities in detail too as well, because this doesn't typically occur until after the contractors are assigned. It's approved by the board, which would be a week from tonight. And then a meeting with the contractors would occur individually, and we would assign routes, and then the booklet would be completed, and that information would be added to as well. So with that, I'll take a break. I've talked enough for a while, and I'll take any suggestions or ideas related to the snow removal handbook. Aside from, I'd love to have iPods or iPads with all this information, the GPS devices. I think they can be distracting at times. But this is, we're getting a step closer to that.
Well, there was one other item on the slide, Alan.
Yes, as far as talking about part-time employees too, as well as seasonal employees, there are some, because we'll take suggestions on this too as well and comments. There are other communities that hire part-time employees to help and assist with snow removal. In our the general consensus is that if you've got the right person and the right fit, it works very, very well. Sometimes part-time employees can be a little harder on the equipment, is some of the feedback that we get. But there again, if you do have the right individual that has some previous experience, that it can be very beneficial. And we've had a few residents within the community, and I think there was a resident at Coffee with the Mayor a couple of months ago that had mentioned that they would be willing to, that they were a licensed driver, and they would be willing to come out and plow snow for the village. So is this one of the things that we want to look at as far as adding, or at least trying on a limited basis here in the near future? So two things that we wanted to pose tonight related to snow removal. One was any comments or suggestions related to the handbook, and we'll give the board members a full copy once it's completed. So you'll know the driver to call, that if you don't see a snowplow for a couple hours, no, I'm joking. But if you do get calls from other residents and things like that and concerns, I mean, you can go to the handbook and say that, yeah, you're in Route 1, and we'll make sure to contact the proper people. So we'll provide that final document. But the other part of it is that just to get the board's feelings as to possibly hiring some part-time employees to assist with this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Couple of comments, I guess. One, it's a tremendous advance in where we were last year in terms of the book and so on. I don't recall seeing this, and it obviously well thought out and so on. The only thing I would wonder about, because it wasn't touched on in your presentation, and we've all been forced to attend FEMA or PEMA courses and all that, and that's chain of command. One, who's ultimately the decision maker? Who's watching over this entire process during an event? And two, who decides if a contractor or we're not doing the job in a certain area that we need to make a switch? Where are those decisions made and by who?
Ultimately the responsibility falls on my shoulders and on Pat too as well. We share that. But we do, in each one of the crews, we have a crew leader that is the supervisor over that shift. And so they have the authority to make the call. They have the option to contact us and request and have a powwow and talk about what we should do too as well. And then we make a collective decision. But ultimately, you're right, it does have to come from the village, but it can come from the crew leaders. We do have that trust level, and we know that they understand the process.
Yeah, they just need to know that they can make those. We suffered with some last year that went several days non-functioning, and I guess I'd like to make sure we have a way of short-circuiting that. If we see a problem, we act on it more quickly than we did before, and it really takes a decision-making process, and maybe want to include something like that in there, just as where the authority lies and who will make the decision. So if there's appeal to somebody, they know who it's being appealed to, and it may well be you, Alan, or maybe Pat or somebody. But it'd be nice to know where that's going to go, because you look to that person to resolve immediate problems.
Archie?
Well, no. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Jumping in front of everyone. Oh, I was just going to say, I think this is great, Alan. The snow book is great. I would support the extra help if you need it. I mean, it's as simple as that. I think it's a life safety issue. It's a service issue to the village residents, and you're a great steward of our finances and that with the department. So, but I think to kind of to Bill's point, I think if you're going to be the person, you don't need every trustee calling every crew leader. I can see nothing but chaos. And I know that's not what Bill meant, but I'm just saying, if you're going to be the person, or it's going to be Pat at some point, or whatever, it's whoever is going to have the lucky hot seat. The point is that I think that filters from you down to those crew leaders. It doesn't hurt if we report something we see, but I think it ultimately needs to come back to you, and we need to let you do your job. I think this is going to be a great improvement. It's a big concern with those cul-de-sacs, because if I was I'm not in one, but if I was in a cul-de-sac and was waiting 12 hours with feet of snow in front of my house, I totally get why people got upset. So this is a great improvement, and you've done a lot of great work. So thank you.
I think the cost benefit on the extra crew is beneficial to the residents. How many lost work days were there? How many potential, life-threatening events could have happened in the cul-de-sacs that weren't plowed last year during the time they weren't plowed? I think that the 6 contractors is a good idea. And I think the exploration of the part-time employees would be a good idea too. I'd like more on the structure on it and how you'd like to do that. I'd like some more input and see what your thoughts were on how you'd like to structure it, and if there's a call-out procedure, or what your thoughts are.
Sure. This year would be the test program for it. And there was a question that was brought up one question that was brought up as far as the employees and our full-time employees. How would they feel as far as overtime and potentially missing out on those things? And it's no secret we're a non-union shop. We always have been. And that I know from just working with the guys during some of these intense events, of course, they need their time off. And we put them in 12-hour shifts, but sometimes we keep them for 16. We can do that legally. And there are times when they double up and the 2 shifts overlap. And we are just about every piece of equipment's out there, and every public works employee that's assigned is out there too as well. And that's the time when we wouldn't necessarily benefit as much from a part-time employee. But after one of the crews came off their 16-hour shift to help supplement the current crew, that would be a great benefit. And we could potentially work that individual, even if it's only 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever. And the interest that we've gotten are actually from people that have retired early, and they'd like to do something and help the community out, and they have some past experience. So I think it's a good fit. And maybe it's 2 employees, or maybe it's 5 or 6 this year, but it's going to be a test program this year. But that's the gap that we're looking to fill, is when we're in that one crew state where we have a couple extra pieces of equipment where they can go out and tackle it.
If I could comment, on the snow book as one particular thought. I don't think there's a municipality anywhere near Plainfield, probably nowhere in Will County or in the state of Illinois is as prepared as what you and your staff have put together. What is becoming disturbing to me is there's a particular term that I use frequently. It's called perseveration, or perseverating, when we continue to talk about a past event. Hey, the winter of 2015 was severe. I don't think the village of Plainfield, Alan Person in particular, has to be continuing to say, mea culpa, mea culpa. It's my fault. It is not our fault. It's something that it was an act of nature that produced this particular disastrous winter. And when people talk about cul-de-sacs, I live on a cul-de-sac. Okay, there's 15 inches of snow has fallen. What are you expecting people to do? You know what? Work with it and go along with it. I never complained. No one in my cul-de-sac complained. In fact, the only one person complained. He said, "Oh, you really got a lot of influence. Why don't you get our cul-de-sac clean?" I said, "What?" I'm not going to try and do that. But I'm just saying, I don't think that we have to continue to apologize for something that occurs. You had a cogent sentence a couple of minutes ago. Reasonable amount of time. The men are working. It's cold, it's snowing, they're tired, etc., etc. Reasonable amount of time. What would you do if you were in their position? I'm not saying not complain all the time, but I think our department is worked overtime. I look at this book and I look at your presentation. I don't think anything could be better thought out. And I know it wasn't only you, Ellen, that put this all together. It was your staff. And so you really have to compliment your staff and compliment everyone who is thinking about it, because an awful lot of thought went into that. And I think you could probably publish it and or the idea and send it to other communities, because I don't think they're that prepared. And I really have to compliment the Village of Plainfield in being prepared. And you're prepared for this next winter, and if the winter is bad, we'll have to live with it. I lived through a few winters. Mr. Lamb's lived through decades of bad winters. But like I say, great compliment to you and your staff for doing this.
You know, I'm going to jump in and just say thank you for that comment. As we took a look at last year's snow event, there was something that was very important that Alan stressed as he was going throughout all of this. And you saw it when he made the public comments regarding that event, and it was, we aren't here to find blame, we're here to find solutions. And that was kind of the goal, was there were some things that didn't go right in that snow event. We were going to learn from it and make ourselves a better organization and a better prepared to handle it. So I really do appreciate what you've done tonight too.
The slides you have up there are solutions, and I think that we're going in the right direction.
Yes, I would just like to say I think it was, what we've seen here, Alan, is an excellent report. Your department, in my view, has always been impressive. I've witnessed nothing but quality work from what I would describe as professional employees. I think, you know, not to point blame or anything, I think the only hiccup that I could see was Mother Nature related, and that goes back to exactly what we're talking about, the snow. And I'm just wondering, I know there's a lot of great improvements mentioned in this, but is there anything that you can comment on as far as what we could learn or what you've learned in terms of best practice so that we can move forward and do better next time it happens? I know there's certain things in here, but it doesn't necessarily really say what really went wrong or what you thought could have changed the situation, that's all.
Well, the after action statement, it outlines some of the hiccups that came along too as well, and definitely communications between our contractors and expectations as far as performance, and just, you know, at that particular event, not having enough pieces of equipment on the street, but not having the pertinent information at the time that we needed it to correct it as quickly as possible was definitely a challenge. So adding additional qualified contractors is a good key to this. And we've had residents that have called and suggested that the village needs to hire 10 employees and buy 10 new snow trucks, and this will fix the problem. But the problem is that when you only have 10 or 12 or 15 events per year, it's really hard to justify the cost of the equipment and find work for the additional employees. And on top of that, we would, at that point, you know, even near that point, 5 employees, we'd have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for additional money to help support that type of operation. With these solutions, especially with the intergovernmental cooperation agreements, there's no additional cost to the taxpayers. Utilizing the contractors is a way that, and you'll see on Tracy's sheets that a couple of years ago, we only spent $90,000 in contractual services. That was a pretty mild year. There was another year we spent $300,000 in contractual services, but we're not anywhere near justifying additional employees and additional trucks too as well. So I think the responsible way to take care of it is to address it in this manner, is to, you know, hold our contractors to a high standard, bring some new contractors, qualified contractors into as well, and then the other part was to secure some additional salt. And I can't tell you what the magic was behind that. We just did a lot better this year than we did the year before, and we're thankful. So, and I thank you for the comment, but I wanted to mention one more thing to Mr. Trustee Krasich, that, and to Brian's comment too as well, is that we do receive calls when things don't go well or they don't happen as quickly as people expect. And we expect that And we appreciate it when people bring things to our attention. I think on the given day, the mayor can attest, we probably had 150 to 200 phone calls in 1 or 2 days, which is pretty heavy. But by the same token, to remind the residents that this is a partnership. You know, this is not your government telling you not to do this or to do this, or this is all we're going to do. But this is a partnership between the residents, the mayor and the board, and the employees here to provide the proper service for the community. And we believe this is the most cost-effective and efficient way to do it, and these improvements will help in the coming year.
You know, oftentimes I hear individuals specifically say what went wrong. You know what? If we were talking about the Titanic in 1912, well, what went wrong? They hit an iceberg. You know what? That's their problem. That was what went wrong. What went wrong with the village of Plainfield? I don't think anything went wrong in the winter of 2015. Number one, what went wrong was Mother Nature gave us a punch in the nose, and that's what went wrong. It's not something that we deliberately did. There's not something that was, a factor that anyone planned to not perform well. It simply was when it snowed again. And where can you put the snow? You try and push it here, push it there. You know what? It's like putting 25 pounds of something in a 20-pound bag. You haven't got enough room for it. And that's what perhaps went wrong. Mother Nature gave us a problem. I don't think our village went wrong. I don't think our staff went wrong. I don't think the service went wrong. I think winter went wrong. Thank you.
Just Alan, could you tell the board, some of the board members aren't really aware of how many actual units you do have owned by the village, and to include end loaders?
Yeah, we have 11 what we call 2.5-ton trucks. So those are the biggest trucks that you see out on the street, just like the truck on the front of the workbook here holds a tremendous amount of salt. With the snowplow, we have 11 of those trucks. We have one that's going to be coming in here shortly that the board authorized the purchase of. So we've got one additional new large truck that's going to be added to as well. We have 11 one-ton trucks, and there's a new additional one-ton truck that's going to be available. We have approximately a dozen pickup trucks that are equipped with snowplows that can help too as well. And when you add in the loaders, we have about 40 pieces of equipment that can be utilized for snow removal. With the additional 6 contractors, you increase that 40 pieces of equipment up to 60 pieces of equipment. So in an event with the contractors, everyone fully functional, you could have up to 100 pieces of equipment out there in a community. And granted, we have 400 lane miles of roadway, and that's a challenge. But 100 pieces of equipment, you can get a lot of work taken care of in a shorter period of time.
Okay. The other thing too is I'm going to agree with Trustee Benucci. Is we can't have. I don't believe we should have all the trustees giving out any phone numbers of any contractors, and it's just to come to an agreement on who they may call. Another thing though too, reference to calls. Is whether I don't know how we could get a weather information call, because you call the Public Works, you have reached the Public Works. Our normal operation hours are 8 to 4, and we're closed Saturdays and Sundays. Well, I think we need something during these snow events stating that the trucks are all out type of fare. If you have a special need or say this subdivision's done, and it should be just updated so that when they call in, they go, all right, the northern subdivisions north of 135th are complete. We're currently moving down, or we're moving up, or moving in, or whatever, because I think it's better than getting a generic message when you call in, because to me, I find it a little irritating to get a generic message, and nobody will ever call you back. And like you said, you guys got a lot more than we did. But here at the Village Hall, these girls downstairs, they were just knocked for a loop with the calls. And it was, some of them were very understanding, but there was a group that wasn't. And I mean a group.
And we, and,
Done.
you know, we've utilized social media in the past, Facebook, Twitter, our own website too as well, and we can make some improvements related to that too.
Okay, and then I have one
Sure.
just minor question. Do we have a welder?
We have a welder.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
we do.
for some of these equipments, when
Yes.
we snap a plow,
We do.
do we have a
For-
welder available so
We
that
do.
they can weld it up, get it out back
Yeah,
out?
for repairs, you know, it's
Okay.
great. Our mechanics typically, they're on call, they're here through a snow shift too as well. They typically load salt for all the trucks that come in. So our mechanics are loading salt, but at the same time, when they're not loading salt, they're repairing equipment. So it really is an efficient use of their time too as well, and it works out well. The mayor touched on another thing too, and this is for the public out there. If there is an individual that has special needs within our community, whether a good example is if we have an individual that's on a ventilator, if we have an individual that has some other special medical equipment that helps sustain their life, or they have some other special needs, please write us a letter. Give it to us in writing. It gets included within the book, and it gets designated on the map too as well. So it's one of those important things. We were up in Quail Run, and I was with a ride-along. This was in 2011. And there was a surgeon that was at the end of his driveway, and he waved the plow down. We don't typically stop, so I don't recommend that people do this. And I hopped out and I talked to him, and he said, I have to be at Loyola in the morning. You've done a good job so far. Can you make sure that the road's clear? And I said, no problem. We can do that. And we did. And he called and he thanked us later. So, you know, it's kind of one of those things that if there are people that have special needs, we want to know about it, and we want to put it in the booklet too as well. So,
Alan,
and-
I'm sorry,
go ahead, Bill.
you had asked about a couple of things about the part-time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great idea. I think you had much success, I think you said, with the summer help.
Yep.
And it seems, especially if the equipment's available, I think maybe, you know, you mentioned overtime or exhaustion maybe kicks in after a certain amount of time, and I'm sure, you know, winter people get sick as well, so I think that might be an opportunity for you. And then you mentioned ideas for the snow book. The only comment that I would make on that is, and maybe you're already doing it, I don't know the whole process, but the thought came up, I don't know if people understand how exactly it's done through the routes. In other words, can the routes be rotated? So in other words, number 1 route doesn't always get started. Maybe number 5 gets started the second snowstorm, or number 8 or whatever. So, you know, one section of town is not always the last one to get plowed. So it kind of rotates through.
And generally speaking, you know, once the individuals are assigned to the routes, that starts at the same time. So as soon as in an event they're loaded with salt and they leave the public works facility, there are 2 or 3 units that'll go to Route 1 and 2 or 3 units that'll go to Route 2. So we are in the entire community during the snow event.
But we have enough capability to hit, 8 routes at the beginning? So everybody goes out and starts, okay. See, I didn't know that.
With the contractors, and they start on the main roads. So, you know, the main roads, whether they be 127th Street, 135th, Meadow is considered to be a collector, you know, and there are a number of them out there that they're out there when the storm begins, and they continue to work on it. So we don't start on the north side and work to the south, it's really spread out, and it happens within, when it's functioning the way it should, it happens within all the routes at the same time.
Thank you. And one last comment is the salt. I think that's a very effective way and probably an effective tool for you. So thank you for putting that as part of this process and increasing your inventory.
Yeah, but there's a sequence, though, that whatever's coming in last on any one of those routes is likely to stay last because they're the most minor roads. There's a sequence in which you've spelled out very nicely here, so I don't want to get expectations too high that we can change that around. You don't want to do the main streets last, so.
No, I'm talking about once you're off the main and into subdivisions, because the subdivision street, I guess, is subdivision street. So while I was saying is somebody's not last all the time in their subdivision. That's my
Yeah,
thought.
it's possible, yeah.
And I think also that, to that point, these cul-de-sacs are not going to be last. I think we're changing our procedure on those. So, because we sat down and figured it out, and I think you said 300?
388.
So we have about 2,000 people affected by these cul-de-sacs. So I know we've had meetings with Alan and his staff, and they've came to agreement they're going to look at the procedures we use and possibly change it. So just so you know.
Just a general comment, following up what I said earlier about the command structure. Trustee Ratchick, who's no longer here, and I have been reading about World War II, the Navy battles, and one of the keys was information, accuracy of information, and the communications. The more you know about what's going on, the better your decisions you can make, and you can defend them. Then you need the decision maker. What you don't want is mass confusion. So you're not exactly tackling World War II Pacific Ocean, but we got the same kind of problem. Leadership, communication, coordination of effort really will pay off here. It's the key to success. And then you don't have to be saying, well, I'm sorry we didn't do that. We did a good job. We need to do a better job, and I think we're going to this coming year because you've got it well thought out. So.
To the mayor's point, I think that information is key, and what I'd like to see, if it's possible, is, we have the village website. Why don't we, if we could possibly use it, if we could put a map up there where the residents could go in, look at what sites are as the plows are going through quadrant 1 or 2 or 3 or however they break it up, it would just blacken out the roads that, okay, this was done and this was done. So at least they know you're out there working and you're getting towards their residents.
We can, there are communities that are work on that basis too as well, and we can definitely talk to IT about that and
That'd be
check
great.
into that.
Part of the difficulty with that is us putting GIS equipment on private contractor equipment. We did have a brief conversation about it. It's a good idea to look at some other possibilities, but the quickest and most responsive way we thought when looked at was the possibility of GPS on the vehicles, but it made it a difficult process.
Even it doesn't have to be real time. It can be delayed at the end of the guy's shift. He could come in and say, okay, I finished, X, Y, and Z streets, and then you can just black them out and click, just it's a click of a mouse.
We'd definitely look into that too.
So before we leave this, if it's okay, I know we're talking about next year's budget, so this would be the budget that starts May of 16. But in our conversation here with regard to the part-time winter seasonal employee, is that something you would feel comfortable if we tried that this winter? It would require a budget amendment, but possibly would require a budget amendment. But right now, the way we are performing, as Mrs. Pleckham shared 2 weeks ago, we're tracking true to where we were last year, which means that our expenditures are underperforming, which is a good thing, and we probably are in a position to be able to take on these additional part-timers with this particular winter, and it'd be a good test to see how it works. Thoughts on that?
I'd support doing it. The only thing I would suggest is make sure we provide some training, particularly on the equipment that they might be running before you have a crisis. Spend a little bit of time up front, so this is what you're likely to run. Let me see you run it, and this is how we do it. If you do that, then I'm fine. I think it'll be a very productive use of people and equipment.
And as Mr. Person said, you said it's a program that's going to get off the ground, so I think it's good to do it this year and try it out while we have the means.
I guess my thought, and maybe I'm way off here, is that would it be a position that would be kind of on call, or would it be a person that would show up certain days? I'm guessing it would be on call based upon weather, correct? So based upon that, I don't see how it would necessarily hurt to do it. If snow comes, it comes. There's not much control we have over that. So I would support them.
I would agree. I would totally, support that, and Alan's judgment is fine with me. I don't think I need to micromanage that, so I think he'll handle it well and go for it.
And of course, any of the prospective part-time employees would have to they'd have to have a valid driver's license, of course. They have to pass the pre-employment requirements, drug and alcohol testing, and all those things too as well. And then it'd be at our sole discretion, the mayor, village board, and management too as well. So if we went into the program in a couple of months or a month and it wasn't working, then we could discontinue the program for a while, or could continue it. So I think it'd be a good year to test it to see, and that's the feedback that I'm hearing from the board is something to pursue.
Absolutely.
I know you have more for us, Alan, but
Yes,
thank you for the dialogue on that.
problem. We have actually one other item to talk about. So we felt like snow removal and trees would probably be up on the top of the list. So it's kind of exciting to have a few things within the street division. I was hoping for a big church audience tonight, but I didn't quite get one, but that's okay too as well. Just to give the board a quick update, as I had mentioned before, and we had this, the forestry employees in here and gave them a little pat on the back. So I thank you for all the kind words for the employees there. We had the challenge of removing over 1,700 trees this year, and the employees did meet that challenge. We on the positive side, and we can see on these graphs that the removals of trees have significantly increased over time. This year, 2011, when we started removing ash trees, we only removed 112 ash trees at that time. The infestation started on the north part of town and really rapidly worked its way south. This past year, we'll have removed over 1,700 trees by the end of the year. And you can see in the graph that depicting on the right, the number of trees that we had before the 5,300 has dropped down to about 1,163 ash trees is where we're at. So we will not have another, I can confidently say that, not have another 1,700, 1,800 tree year again, at least not related to the ash trees, and hopefully we never have a problem like this with any of the other species. What I didn't include in the graph, because this is newly updated information, we did start the fall planting as far as new trees. These trees have been installed where trees were removed either a year or 2 years ago. We're actually starting to catch up a little bit. We've got a lot of positive feedback related to it. In October, through the Tree Consortium, 303 trees were planted. In November, approximately 400 trees will be planted. We'll try and get as many as we can. If that occurs, that'll bring the fall planting up to 700 trees, just over 700, 703. And if you include that with the spring planting that we had at 220, we'll have planted by the end of the year 920 trees, or near 1,000 trees. So if that occurs, which the board has authorized it, we've gotten authorization through the consortium to get at least another 400 or so. That'll bring us up to 900 trees for this year, which will be the highest amount that we've ever planted in any given year, and that'll bring the total number of replacement trees up to 2,600. So the good news is that I think when you compare to our surrounding neighbors, and I'm not trying to pick on any of the other communities, that we're well ahead of the curve, not only in removals, but also as far as replacements. And it's a great benefit that the board has been very supportive in this program, so we're very proud of that too as well. Ultimately, we'll probably never get to the 5,000 level as far as replacements for ash trees, because in some areas they were planted too closely, they were crowding each other, and one tree makes sense where there were 3 trees before in some instances. But we're well on our way. There is money within capital actually for ash trees in the draft capital plan for replacements. And the other positive thing that I wanted to mention as far as contracting out, after this year's completed, most of the larger trees will have been removed. And so next year's contractual services will actually drop a little bit compared to what we had this year. Now I'll end on stumps, because I know stumps are a question. This year, of course, if you take down 1,700 trees, you're going to have about 1,700 stumps out there. We have removed, the village has removed 410 stumps as of today, through the summer. We did contract out, and under the contract already approved by the board, we still have some additional room. They've removed 190. Approximately 600 stumps have been removed as a total. And based on the contractors, our estimate, the contractor charges us based on the size of the stump that's left. And based on that, we believe the contractor can remove an additional 700 stumps or so. So between the contractor's forces and our forces, we'll do everything we can to get the remaining 1,200 stumps removed by the end of the year. Now that depends on weather. If we get into some dicey weather, of course, we'll be plowing snow and not removing stumps. But when we're not plowing snow, we'll be removing stumps. And so that's a plan behind that too as well. So I'll be happy to answer any questions related to the tree program. too as well.
What's the deficit going forward as far as the amount of trees that we still have to replace after, as far as next year and years
Yeah.
on?
Next year, I mean, if we can do 900 trees a year, and we talked about the removal process, it'd be about 5 years, and we're almost in the 6th year, and we're almost done. But the tree replacement program, when we talked about this initially, we said realistically this may be a 10-year program. And so if we reinstall 900 trees next year, you figure we're at the 3,500 range, 900 trees the following year, you know, you're almost in that 4,000 range and closer to 4,500 in that range. That's not a bad place to be. I mean, I think that's, from what I've seen and read, it's a lot more responsive than what's going on in the area. And people do call, and they really do appreciate it. They appreciate the quality of the trees, and they've had a very good survival rate too as well.
And Alan, there was a backlog of where we didn't plant, and it wasn't even ash borer related losses. We already had a backlog of trees that we were trying to catch up with before that. How many years back were we before we started catching up, shall you say?
Yeah, before we really started in the emerald ash borer, that list was about 3 to 5 years old, depending on the location. So there were people that waited for approximately 5 years to get a replacement tree. So we did have some others that, and we will get other trees that just die for whatever reason, and that need to be replaced. But last year and the beginning of this year, we really did get a chance to catch up, and most of the people that are waiting for a tree, it was just a year or maybe a year and a half ago that their ash tree was removed. So we're getting closer and closer. And again, this has been a very, very popular program with our residents. So good.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Persons? If not, then we're going to turn it over to Mrs. Pleckham to really bring home the numbers and put the numbers behind all the details that Mr. Persons just talked about.
Correct.
As well, then she will continue straight in after that into the miscellaneous funds, correct?
Correct. So what you have in your packet and displayed on the screen now is the, we'll start with the Streets Division summary page. And the Streets Division is comprised of 4 programs, administration, street maintenance, forestry, and vehicle maintenance, which the detail is after the summary page. What you see on the summary is a global perspective of the whole division, and it's broken down by classification. So between what was adopted for this current fiscal year and what's being proposed for fiscal year 17, you're looking at a 1.7% change increase in budget. Primarily, you're going to see utilities increasing at about $30,000. That's directly related to the electricity that Alan spoke to, that we're working on getting better costs for and related to the street lighting and things of that nature. Salaries and wages are also up. You'll see benefits are down slightly from what we adopted this year, and primarily there was some turnover with some senior employees that had left. We've got some younger employees in, so our benefit numbers are better. We've had better returns as it relates to our health insurance renewals, so it's pretty flatlined as it relates to there. But generally speaking, it's a pretty flat budget for all intents and purposes. But the summary page kind of highlights where the changes are within each classification, and then the next pages 1 through 3 will we can touch briefly on. And again, I can highlight any significant differences between the years, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. The first page, which is the administration program, this primarily houses the cost for the upper management and any of the crew leaders, administrative type works. We house some of the salaries that are related to the supervisory functions of the program in here. Again, it's generally speaking this very minimal increase across the board as far as anything to highlight. There's really not a whole lot changing between last year and this year. The heart of their budget is within page 2, which is the street maintenance program. This is what Alan touched primarily on within his presentation. I can touch through most of the changes or most of the updates. Like I said, electricity is, we're recommending that we propose we hit closer to what our 15 actual number was, which is $290,000. And you'll see that reflective in the proposed budget. as you go down the page, you'll see some changes within vehicle maintenance and street light maintenance. Some of them are just truing up to what actually came within the audit that we've just approved in the last board meeting. Snow removal is still being proposed at about $280,000. As you can see, last year the village spent $234,000 in contractual snow removal. So, again, Alan spoke to it. 2014, $354,000 was spent in contractual snow removal. So, and then the prior year was $94,000. So, again, it's kind of one of those numbers that we watch. We look at averages and try to select what we feel is a conservative number to move forward. And again, that is just one area that we keep focused on. And because we present the budget at an earlier date, given that it's just the end of October, this budget gets looked at between now and even March as far as the numbers are concerned. If there are any significant changes, this does get represented back to the board. Another specific example will be within the salary and wages component of this particular program. This is where the part-time snow removal employees would come into play. Given the history of where we've been on part-time, I think this is a great test case this season to see how it goes. I think from a numbers perspective, I think we'll be able to look at that through the next few months to see how that develops. And we may or may not revisit those numbers for fiscal 17 based on how we see the experience this year. So as we bring this document back, I will let the board know if these numbers are changing in any way, shape, or form, for what reason. So if we look to increase the part-time salaries a little bit, I'll communicate that to you as well. Page 3 represents forestry and vehicle maintenance programs, and those are, again, pretty straightforward as far as last year's adopted and what's current. So, I mean, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Alan kind of highlighted all of the functions and functionality within the divisions, and again, just under 2% increase across the board right now with the streets division.
I'm sorry, Tracy, I just have a question regarding the, and it's really more directional, the employee insurance for like administration. If you look at 2015 and then you look at 2016 estimated, it's actually gone up. And then, but if you look at the street maintenance, the actual for 15 is higher than it is in 16, so it's actually gone down.
Correct. And street maintenance in particular is where 2 of the employees have left, and we've gotten 2 different employees in place. And their health programs and what they're covered under their insurance went from a family to a single coverage. So what you're going to see in that specific instance is that it's a little less expensive for that employee because they're only covering a single person.
Okay, so that's
so
that's
it's always, it looks different sometimes, and then sometimes there's some shifts within the division. So there's promotions that happen maybe halfway through last year where it would impact this year at a whole annual basis. Given that, and then the change within the cost of the health insurance itself, it looks different sometimes within the divisions just because of those 2 primary issues.
It's health insurance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, primarily health.
And then one other question, and it's a small detail, but I'm just curious if there was some kind of a change in policy under the forestry program where there were no uniforms or clothing. Now there is a line item for that. Was that a change in the policy, or?
Oh, we had nothing budgeted, and now there's about $500 budgeted under forestry.
Yeah,
Correct.
I'm just curious. If there was nothing before, now is it a change that we've started providing that, or they had a?
It's just a better division. Of course, all the employees are required to wear safety vests, safety jackets, things where they, high vis, safety boots, steel-toed boots, and things like that. And this is just trying to appropriate the proper cost. Since we have 3 employees within forestry, we want to make sure to extract it out of the right line item. That's all.
Thank you.
A couple of comments. One of maybe cheating a bit, but these are very conservative forecasts, and you've been doing it. This is the 5th year. We got 4 years here plus now the budget, so you continue to underperform. And perhaps it's cheating to say that we could look at any individual numbers and question this or that. Bottom line is you don't meet your expenditure budget and have not for several years in a row, which means you're controlling the expenses very well. And from my point of view, that's basically what I look for, is the fact that there are no surprises. We end up getting a little bit more revenue than we expected, which is a good surprise. and we don't spend more than we expected to, which would be a bad surprise. So the bottom line is the budgets are incrementally changed, but they're very, very effective. You stay conservative, which I applaud. I've budgeted too in the past, and it's not an easy process if you try to be very precise. You look at the bottom line, that does matter, because if you're off by 5 or 10% on the total, then you got a problem. But if you're under on expenses on the total, you're doing a beautiful job, and I'd keep it up. So I sense there's no difference here, because everything looks like you've looked at them all line by line item, and you do your best to make the estimate, but you're wrapping them all up, and that's what we should be looking at from a trustee point of view.
This particular budget last year, we were $6,000 under budget for streets division. Usually we're not running a close ship on that end, but in general fund, it looks as a global fund. So general fund is consistent of all the divisions. Last year, it's just the way that it had happened. And there's one line item or another you can point to. One's higher, one's lower. So again, to your point, we try to stay conservative, and there may be a hiccup along the way in one of those expenditures, but you're hopeful that it doesn't hit all of them at the same time.
Yeah, I did a great job. Thank you.
Are there any other comments regarding the streets division summary from Mrs. Pleckham? Okay. If not, we'll move on to the miscellaneous funds.
Right, and always I open with miscellaneous funds doesn't mean that they're not important. It's just where we house our 8 funds that are primarily supportive of certain contractual obligations, or have to be a separate fund based on some legal basis that needs to be separated based on audit standards or anything through accounting standards. There are 8 in your packet. I don't have a slide for it, but in your packet you'll have a summary page that displays all 8 funds. I'll just go from page to page. It's a lot easier to explain it that way. The first fund, Alan actually and his staff had talked about during the capital presentation. This is our motor fuel tax fund. Again, this is funding that comes through the state called MFT entitlements. At this point, the village has not received any funding since August for MFT, but we are assured that we will receive that. It's just a matter of the budget impasse. What we've projected currently at this point in time is estimated based on historical reference as well as what we have received in the last few months. So with that, the revenue side, if I see any changes between now and the time that we publish the budget for approval, I will give the board a heads up if anything's changing. I think 1.25 million is probably consistent with what we've seen in the past. On the expenditure side, the street improvements line item, that $1 million that's listed there, is part of our street maintenance program. If the board recalls, there's $2 million that's obligated for continuous maintenance of our existing roadway networks. $1 million comes from our MFT fund, and the other $1 million comes from the capital fund, which was presented earlier in the year or last month. Other than that, the transfer to capital, we do budget a transfer to capital for $200,000 for MFT purposes. That's expenditures that are related to MFT, such as salt, that can be spent through MFT dollars. Sometimes we will obligate those dollars for costs that we spend out of our corporate fund. You can see in the history sometimes that we actually don't initiate that transfer. Staff recommends that if we don't need to, we use that funding for our street improvements and continue to keep our roadway network as up to that 80% threshold that we like to try to get to. So that is the MFT fund, and we do need to keep this fund separate from our corporate fund. That's why you see it in a separate fund. The next 2 pages are bond and interest funds. This is our debt service for the village. This is most of our debt service for the village. There are some debt service instruments within water and sewer, and you'll see that through that presentation. The property tax revenue that comes through this fund is directly related to a bond issue that was initiated back in 1999. It's probably got 2 years left, if I remember correctly, 2 to 3 left. So this levy does, you'll see this number again when we speak to the tax levy, which is coming at our next board workshop. The $116,000 is directly related to the debt service that is on that bond issue. The rest of the debt service payments are for various projects that had been taken on through the village. A portion is being paid from water and sewer, as is indicated through the transfers. and a portion is being paid through capital because some of it is related to facilities such as Village Hall. Not all of that is Village Hall, but that's just an example. The police department is another bond issue that we have outstanding, and some of those transfers come from those funds. But globally, the expense side are all the debt service payments that are related to the village that are not 100% water and sewer related. The next page, on page 4, is Tort Immunity. Tort Immunity is our workers' comp and liability insurance fund. This fund is a separate fund because property tax revenue is collected regarding the contractual obligations we have for these two insurance products. As you'll see, again, when we bring the tax levy forward, you'll see these numbers again. We've just received the, you can see in 2016 estimated amount. Those are the actual costs that were paid for our umbrella and our liability. This is brokered out. We are in a consortium, which is called SWARM. It's a Southwest Area for Risk Management. It's comprised of various communities within the local area. I believe there's 7 at this point. And there is a broker, and these services are costed out on an annual basis, and we collectively share in the good and the bad. And as it relates to the experience for the village, we've had a positive experience as it relates to our claims process and how workers' comp and our liability insurance has been consistently on a positive side. The challenge in this particular fund is the competition and lack of competition within this industry as it relates to municipal insurance coverage. But globally, I think that the village is in a better position given the fact that we have a consortium and we are sharing knowledge, costs, and also coverage within a number of communities in the area. The 5th page is the audit fund, and that's specifically related to our annual audit for the village. Currently, property tax revenue is collected in relation to costs associated with the audit and spent in the same manner. So $42,000 is the predicted estimate for revenue expenditures. All of these funds that I speak to that's property tax related, the reason why they're in their funds is they can only be spent for this purpose. So at some point, even though the audit fund is reflecting just a $4,000 balance, fund balance, those funds could not be utilized for general operations of the village. They have to be specifically utilized for this purpose. That's what the property taxes are collected for. So staff tries to continue to keep these fund balances low when possible so that we're not collecting a larger fund balance. And if we were to do something like that, you would notice that the property tax revenue requested would be less. So we can try to keep this as close to exact as possible. Page 6 and 7 reflect the police pension fund. Police pension fund is funded from obviously gains and losses within the fund itself and interest income, as well as employee and employer contributions. So what's reflected here, and this is one that we'll talk through probably at the next workshop, the employer contributions is increasing from what we have currently to $1.1 million. This employer contribution is collected through the property tax levy process. At this point, we will be looking at what I would consider a significant increase on a pension side, and primarily when we get to the levy process, we'll talk through how that impacts the other funding as far as property taxes. So we will have that conversation in the future. This dollar amount that's being recommended is through an actuarial process. So there's an actuarial that comes in annually, audits the police pension as far as does the actuarial analysis for all the employees that are included within the pension fund, as well as the retirees, comes up with a calculation based on state statute. The village is calculated based on 100% funding, which has been our policy in the past, and we have been 100% funded as far as what is required to be funded at an employer level, and that is what's being proposed to move forward, is that same dollar amount. It's just the fact that the calculation has on the way that the states changed some of their statutes this past year has increased the funding a little bit higher than what we're used to seeing from a year-to-year basis.
Yeah, the formulas that they require for the mortality rates have been changed. And those mortality assumptions have a little less blending to the rates, so you don't have the averaging effect, and as a result, it is requiring additional funds.
From a state perspective, the state statute requires that the village can fund at a 90% level, and that has not been the policy of this village to fund at a 90% level. So we're actually funding higher than what the state is recommending or what the state requires. That difference, I believe the 90% level was about 980,000 if I had to remember off the top of my head, but we'll have those conversations. But that's where that number is driven from. And moves forward. And on the page 7 is the expense part of that. And this is based on really just the retirees that are existing. Everything else goes into their fund balance, and they utilize that for future payments for the retirees that are coming in the future years. Page 8 is the DARE fund. This fund is currently being budgeted at $15,000 in contributions. These are contributions that are taken in specifically for the DARE program, and expenditures are the same as such. This fund, we're in the process of looking to see if we would be able to combine and remove the fund, not because we're not going to have a DARE program. It's more from an accounting perspective, is legally required to have a fund as a separate fund. From what I'm hearing so far, there's no legal obligation to keep this fund as a separate fund, and if we can consolidate, we will still track this revenue and expense on a DARE level as we do with other things like asset seizure and things of that nature. So it's possible within our system to do that. The auditors track it that way. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is if in February or January when these numbers come back, if this fund goes into our general fund or gets consolidated within our general fund, I will communicate that to the board and let you be aware of that. But at this point, DARE contributions are being estimated at $15,000, and the expenditures are the same. Again, it's a smaller fund, so there's a question from the auditors that come up every year as to the village doesn't need to have any additional funds that aren't. Not that they're not necessary, but from an accounting perspective, it's much easier to work with less funds than more. If the board recalls, a few years back, we've consolidated a couple of funds in the past years as well. And then on page 9, one of the last funds is our tax increment financing fund. This is the downtown TIF fund. Again, because when this TIF was established, legally required to have this fund separate from accounting perspective and from a tracking perspective. So what you see in property tax revenue is what's estimated to come in for the next fiscal year. On the expenditure side, there's some significant facade improvements that are coming down the pike that the board has already approved. It's just a timing issue right now as to when the work will be completed and when the facade improvements will be paid out. So you'll see some estimates as it stands today on where we feel that those improvements may be paid out based on the existing facade agreements that are in place. Contractual services are related to some of the refresh in the downtown. We're still working closely on those numbers to see, based on this year versus next year, what will be spent. But at this point in time, staff is presenting $525,000 for next fiscal year. And again, as this evolves in the next few months, if this were to change, you'll be communicated that as well. Right at this point, the TIF has a fund balance of just under $1 million. So what you'll see at the end for fiscal 17, a recommendation to spend some of that fund balance. The TIF fund ends in 2021. Any residual fund balance at that point in time, if it isn't utilized for refreshing or for facade improvements or for the purposes of the TIF itself, will get redistributed back to the taxing bodies at that point in time. And then the final page is the alcohol enforcement fund. Alcohol fines are brought into this fund and then automatically basically transferred to the general fund for purposes within our corporate fund. This is another fund that we're looking into possibly consolidating. However, I believe this one has to remain separate based on statute. So I don't believe you'll see this one consolidated. It is a small fund, and it does get utilized for alcohol enforcement duties such as alcohol enforcement checks at the local establishments when they send people out for that purpose and things of that nature. So there are strict guidelines as to how this can be utilized, and that is how they are being utilized as such through the corporate fund within the transfer itself. So with that, I'd be opening the floor to any questions. If there's anything in these, again, you'll see these again in the next few months. And I just wanted to make sure I highlighted some of the property tax related revenues. You will absolutely see at the next workshop when we talk about the tax levy.
Are there any questions?
Not on that. I do have one question, if I could, for Alan. You made a rather intriguing comment to begin with, that we're doing more with less from several years ago, and I agree with you. We are doing better. There's two reasons for that, possibly, and I'm just curious how you would weight the two. One is the people doing the work are more productive, or we're providing them better equipment so they're more efficient at what they're trying to do. You got a feel for how those two are weighted?
The answer is yes.
I know that, but
We definitely, the technology and thinking towards the future, like 15, 20 years ago as far as technology, with a water meter reading system, there are many communities that still read meters by hand. ComEd still walks the routes. They read meters. We read them through radio frequency. We do 12,000 in a day. I mean, talk about an efficiency improvement. It took years to implement, but there's where technology really did pay off. And there are many other areas. But, of course, equipping your employees with the proper skills, if they can do the job more efficiently and they feel more productive, ultimately you're going to save money. You're going to save money on equipment maintenance, and you're going to save money just on time, too, as well. So I would say the answer to that is yes. How's that, Bill?
well, but part of what I'm after is the capital expenditures we've been putting into upgrading your equipment.
Sure.
You do feel it's paying off in terms of more reliability and bigger, stronger pieces of equipment, move things better and all that. So
Definitely, and the employees enjoy using, the latest technology too as well. They're very open to it, and it helps their job, make their job easier, and it's just more efficient. So we will continue to encourage that. But I thank the board's support, because every time these expenditures come around, they're not necessarily nickel and dime. Some of them are bigger expenditures, but in the long run, they do pay off. So.
Thank you.
Any other trustee questions or comments?
Great leadership, Alan. You run a great shop. That's what the difference is, as far as I'm concerned. So thank you.
Reminders, Mayor?
November 6th is our next village board meeting. The 4th will be Coffee with the Mayor. It's moved up a week. November 9th is our next committee of the whole, and our offices will be closed on November 11th for Veterans Day.
Seeking a motion to adjourn
So moved.
and a second.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, the same sign. We stand adjourned.